Hello, pleasure seekers, and welcome to my virtual cave where I get to have tea with fabulous female thought leaders and female entrepreneurs and just badass chicks overall. And, I really, in my years of working with women in my coaching practice and my movement classes, I've come to realize the vast importance that pleasure plays as a form of medicine for us. And so in these sessions, we come together to explore the role of pleasure as in different aspects of our lives. So today I have with me Stephanie Burg, who's a fellow graduate from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. So you guessed it, ladies, she is a health coach as well. And I just love what Stephanie is up to in the world as a certified nutrition and lifestyle coach. And a fierce advocate of the human form, Stephanie teaches women to return to the innate wisdom and brilliance of their female bodies by shedding outmoded, limiting beliefs and prioritizing excellent nutrition and self-care. So she believes that when a woman loves her body and loves the body that she calls home, she embraces her power to create the life that she was born to live. So welcome, Stephanie. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So Stephanie has a really, really inspiring story, which is why I brought her here today. And she was a professional dancer who, after years of restrictive disordered eating, decided enough is enough. And she took the power back and is now owning the shit out of it. So Stephanie, you have such a fascinating story, and I really just want to have the ladies and myself hear from you. And if you could just talk a little bit about, as you tell it, like what in specific spurred you to switch out of this world of professional dancing into this world of health and wellness.
Yeah, so I started dancing as a little girl. I was around 5. My grandmother enrolled me in dance lessons, and pretty early on I fell in love with it. There was something about the movement and the music, but also the beauty of the art form and performing, how just gorgeous it was to me as a little girl. It really captivated me. And early in that training, I was around 9 years old. I was asked to lose weight for the first time. I wish I had a picture that I could show you, because as a 9-year-old, it's like I wasn't overweight. I was very healthy. And, I remember at that time thinking, that there was something deeply wrong with me, that there was something wrong with my body, and I sort of had this deep insecurity and shame around my body kind of grow and expand from there. I still loved dancing, and as I grew up and as I became a professional, that conversation around weight was revisited so many times, basically every year it seemed. So from the time I was 9 until, grown woman. And as I became a professional dancer, I started to, lose a lot of that love for dancing. It became a job to me because it was there was a lot of harsh judgment of the body involved, and I never felt like I was good enough, even though I had achieved this sort of lifelong dream that I had been working towards. I wasn't happy, and I was feeling inadequate a lot of the time. And around the time I hit 29, I suffered my first major injury. It was an ankle sprain that I sort of ignored for around 6 or so months, and it ended up becoming much more serious than that. So I ended up having to have surgery, and that whole process kind of took me out of my career and off the stage for around a year. And in that time, I was really able to sort of explore who I was outside of that sort of dancer role and dancer image. And I kind of started to get to know myself again, which I never really had that opportunity to do that. I was so focused on the way my body looked and making sure I remembered my choreography and pleasing my boss at the time, that it was sort of like myself, me. I wasn't really connected with her. So during that time, I kind of, got to really, really explore what I liked, what brought me pleasure, what made me happy, and I really enjoyed that time. And, at the same time, I was really eager to get back on stage and get back into the swing of things, and I did. After that surgery and the recovery, I worked super hard. I remember spending like an hour on the elliptical in the morning, and then in the afternoon, and really, I was eating raw foods, which is, a way for me to really deprive myself. I would eat like cucumber slices for lunch, and, I sort of got to probably my lowest weight to date, and I felt really proud of myself, and I was celebrated by all of my colleagues for this like recovery. I had this major role that I did, which is really, really awesome for me. And at the same time, I was sort of recognizing this disconnection that had been created with myself, and sort of as I got back into the dance world and was repeating these patterns that I had created, it's like, here's the disconnect. Like, well, what about this, this person that you were able to explore when you are out of work, and here you are and you're forgetting her again. Mm-hmm. So, those sort of like just my mindfulness, my awareness around that relationship started to grow. And like, am I really living in alignment with what I'm truly enjoying as a person versus my life as a dancer? And so probably around 6 months after I had the year off, recovered, done this major role, I had my next injury, which was the other ankle sprain. And I remember just being so fucking pissed, really angry at my body. I was like, what the hell? I just, like, this is happening again. That injury took me out for around another 6 months. And as soon as I recovered from that injury, same process, getting back into it, I had my next major injury, which was, I'm sort of giving you the Cliff Notes version of all of this, but, it was essentially I was dropped out of a lift with a partner, and my neck was a neck injury. And I remember at that time, I was sort of, in dancing, it's kind of no pain, no gain. You kind of have to push past your pain threshold, and, I remember as a kid learning, like, the audience doesn't care if your feet hurt. Like, you gotta smile and suck it up and, show this, this beauty, regardless of how you are actually feeling, which, really created this disconnect between my mind and my body. And I started to recognize that, number one, wasn't serving me, and how really dysfunctional that relationship was becoming. So the neck injury was one that it wasn't necessarily a question of whether or not I was going to be able to dance again. It was kind of like, am I going to be able to lift my arms up over my head, or do normal daily tasks where I have to lift, like a bag of groceries out of the car or something like that. So, and I remember the day that injury happened, lying on the floor and just crying, and I couldn't feel my whole left side. Like, my whole arm was just like numb, and there was more of a focus from my director, my boss, around whether or not I was going to be able to perform like that weekend. Like, instead of like, are you as a person okay? It was more about my body as this tool or instrument rather than, are you okay? Like, it's just such a I just had a realization, like, if you don't care about yourself, nobody else is going to. Like, if you don't take care of yourself, no one else is going to. And, funny enough, as I went through the process of recovery from that injury, which also took a long time and a lot of work and days of lying on my back, crying because it hurt to, like, hold my head up. My neck hurt so bad. I felt like I couldn't even hold my head up. And once I started to kind of forget that pain and, heal, I immediately went back to that same routine that I had always had my whole life, which was the restriction of calories, the pushing my body past its, like, pain threshold and exhaustion levels. And I was working by myself in the studio one day, really, just repeating those patterns. And I heard, like, my higher self, or my, like, real, whatever you want to call it, I really heard that sort of ego part of my brain just literally like verbally abusing my body. And it was like in that moment I just had such a strong awakening. It was like just, of course, breakdown on the studio floor, crying and realizing like, what are you doing to yourself? You're literally destroying your body. You're literally, killing yourself right now. What's it going to take for you to recognize that something's got to shift here? What's the next injury going to be? And so in that moment, I'm like crying on the floor, like snot running down my nose, and I'm like all by myself. And I picked up my phone and I immediately sent an email to my boss saying, I'm done. I quit. And the scariest freaking decision of my life, like, who am I without this identity? Who am I without this job? And it's interesting, after that, a lot of things sort of started to unfold for me, and I still danced, and I still was able to, perform and things like that, but it was on much more of my terms, much more of me taking a stand for myself and me taking a stand for my body versus, listening to that negative inner voice, or having, my boss, push me past the point of what I was able to do. And, just to kind of be fair, not all ballet companies are quite as harsh, but this one in particular was very dysfunctional. And it's no longer in existence as a result of that. But, it's been quite a journey. I found the reason that I sort of pursued dancing to begin with as a little girl, I lost that completely as I kind of went overboard with trying to achieve, being this high achiever, which many of us are, and we hold ourselves to such rigid standards at times when it's coming to our body or what we expect of ourselves. And, I found that totally just sucked the juice, like sucked the life out of this dream that I had, or this love that I had for ballet. And it kind of took all of that garbage and the pain and the tough stuff to really come back to a place of like, whoa, you really took it too far. And, how can you still love this art form that you really, fell in love with?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh, it's an epic story. So there's so much juice in there, and I have a ton of different places that we can go from here. But what really struck me in what you're talking about, and that I talk about a lot as well in my community, is this no pain, no gain paradigm. And I think it's so important, not just so for you, it was the very specific in your dance career. And I think that women everywhere can relate to this concept of going into something with good intention and really loving it and being convinced that this is your passion. And then somewhere along the way, we just get so into the grind of things that we forget to take a step back and reevaluate, like, is this really worth it? And am I enjoying the process? And so I'm curious, when you, if you're seeing this also in your work now with the women that you work with, and just as you observe the world, that there is a slow shift from this no pain, no gain that we've so, like, it's been ingrained in us, like, you must suffer to see results. And I say that as someone who's gone through that similar journey and is still on it, right? So I'm wondering if that is something you've observed, and what you generally would respond to. Like, if someone were coming to you and be like, I gotta push through it. What do you usually offer them?
That's a great question. I've found a lot of women sort of in resistance to this idea of taking that step back and slowing down and really, creating their life experience based on what pleases them or what makes them feel good. I think there's this idea that, to not push yourself, on one hand, is to lie in bed and eat, bonbons and, smoke pot or something like that, get, like, drink all day, or, indulge yourself in, like, fatty foods. And, it basically, in other words, it's like, if if you pursue your desires, or you pursue the things that really bring you joy, that you will be unsuccessful, or that you will be, you know, a screw up, or you'll be lazy. And, you know, I think there's a big conversation happening around this idea of balance, you know, and recognizing that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You know, I seem to encounter that a lot with the women that I work with. So one of the things that I try to just offer and try to have these women pull in are the little things, you know, the little daily experiences that start to add up to, you know, a big shift, you know, that start to add up to you taking a step back in your day-to-day and being like, whoa, I'm really grateful, I'm really happy. And that doesn't mean that you have to, like, you know, quit your job and lay on the couch and, you know, like, just eat chocolate all day. It can be as simple as, you know, taking those moments when you are, you know, waking up in the morning to really look around yourself and appreciate, you know, the sun is shining through the window, or that you're really enjoying this, like, cup of tea in the morning, or, you know, it can be little things. I think taking, as women, when we are really focused on achievement and pushing through, it sort of becomes this, like, tunnel vision, right? It's like I picture in my brain, you know, a telescope where we're just focused on that one thing, right? And so slowly but surely, it's kind of like expanding that view, you know, just a little bit at a time. And that happens by starting to pull in things that bring you pleasure and joy. You know, I have one client that I'm working with right now, and we were talking about this very thing, and, you know, I suggested, you know, bringing more beauty into her physical space when she's working, whether that's, you know, a candle, if she's allowed to burn a candle in her office, or bringing in some flowers, or, you know, having things around her that just make things a little bit more pleasurable. And I know that might sound really simple or even cheesy, but those things are what really add up to make you be like, oh, I'm looking around myself and I see beauty, or I feel, you know, a certain way because of these things in the space. And she said, well, I don't, you know, my view with flowers is like, they're going to die, so why spend money on them? You know, and I thought about that a lot. I've been thinking about that a lot, because I think a lot of women sort of don't place a value around those little things, because it's like, well, what's the point? You know, I got to get through the day. Like, what are flowers going to really do to make that any better? That's a waste of money. But, you know, it's about kind of appreciating yourself in terms of, you know, that beauty or that luxury. You know, recognizing that by treating yourself really beautifully, by providing yourself with those little things, you start to sort of shift your perspective on what, you know, what your worth is. You know, that we could take that, you know, on a whole other tangent, but it's sort of, you know, kind of bringing in more luxury to your day. And that doesn't mean, you know, you have to have a massage every day. That could be little things like, you know, adding some, you know, really beautifully scented oil to your bath, or, like I mentioned, flowers. I love flowers. And I'm looking at the one behind your ear, so maybe that's it too. You know, bringing flowers in, or making sure that you have, like, you know, your favorite meal in the evening, or something like that. It's like, you know, taking those moments to appreciate your own pleasure, your own desires. You know, because this life is a long time, but it's also, you know, worth, you know, we're given these bodies that are, you know, so sensory, and it's like we have all of these senses, and life is supposed to be a sensual experience, you know, and so often we just forget that we have those senses, because we're focused on that you know, one thing. So yeah, just kind of expanding slowly and starting to bring in little things. I like to pose the question, you know, what would make this experience more beautiful, or what would make this experience more pleasurable? And I offer that to a lot of my clients as well too, like asking yourself that in any moment. You know, if you really hate checking your email, then maybe, you know, what would make this experience more pleasurable is something that could help make that task a little bit less daunting.
Blast really good music, in my opinion.
Yeah. I was actually just thinking that as you said that.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, definitely. I think the two things that I felt were so key here in what you were saying is, one, treating treating yourself like you are a loved one. So
Yes.
really loving yourself through these little gestures. So the same way that it's completely normal for us to, or I guess it's more accepted, quote unquote, for us to be getting flowers for someone else, like if we're going to a dinner or for our partner or whatever, a birthday, that sort of a thing, it seems so like not only okay, but like in a way expected that you would do a gesture, like this would be a gesture that you would do, but getting yourself flowers is considered like that's a waste of money. And so it's so interesting to be able to get to this place where you can shift your mind from a place of, oh, but it's just for me, that's not worth it, versus because it's for me, it's exactly worth it. And I can say from my experience I'll take this on a different, sort of a different tangent here, is that I used to hate cooking for myself. And for the longest time I used to love having roommates, because then I would just cook for both of us and it would feel like a nice, fun little party. And then at some point I lived alone and I was like eating all these tiny little scraps that I would put together in cold food. And I was just like, this sort of sucks, but there's no one here to cook this for. And then there was just this like realization that I need to wine and dine myself. Like if I can't wine and dine myself, then no one else should be able to either. Like no wonder no one else is, right? Like,
yeah.
And so you got to start with yourself, and whether that is buying yourself the flowers. I just got these a couple of days ago when everything was feeling really dark and gray, and I was like, I'm gonna go spend $10 on beautiful flowers and put them by my desk, because just looking at the colors and waking up all of my senses, which is the second thing that you spoke about, can just inspire and get your energy moving again in a way that when you're just looking at a white wall or window might not happen. So we forget the importance of all the little things that can just tickle your senses on every level, from the colors to the smell, I just said smell, to the taste of really rich chocolate. Like it could really be on any level. And so going back to the email, that can seem really boring because, yeah, it's interesting for the mind a little bit, depending on what it is that you're writing. You could even be writing an email about an amazing project and still feel like, oh, this is a bit of a stale task, because not all your senses are being used. And so, add some Lil Wayne or Enya or whatever your jam is, right? And then suddenly you're like, I don't know you, but hip hop gets me going a lot faster. I start to get a little crazy. But so there's so many ways in which you can add those little things, what I like to call like the spice throughout your day, that really, really helps.
Totally.
So I love that.
Totally, because you think about those, all of those little moments, how many, most of us check our email every day, maybe even multiple times a day, or you spend, the vast majority of your time at your desk at work or whatever, those little moments and those little things are what add up to create your life experience. It's like one of my clients shared with me I think it was a documentary that she was watching, and these people interviewed people that were actually dying, and a lot of them said that their number one regret was, I regret that I worked so hard and I didn't really go after living the life that I was put here on this earth to live. And, and that can be, that can translate to different things for different people. But I just think that idea of, if you hate checking your email and you add up an hour of email every single day for the rest of your life, that's a lot of time to spend like doing something that you really dislike. And, not to say that you shouldn't check your email, but, how can you embrace your life in such a way that most of the moments are things that make you happy or bring you joy?
I love that. On that topic of there's been a lot of articles. It's been very much articles and documentaries out there on this idea of like people asking those who are on their deathbed or somewhere near, the end, or like with a really awful diagnosis, like, what do you regret? What do you not regret? What would you wish you had more of? And what I think is interesting is, some people will do this exercise where like, I'm just going to live 1 month as though I'm dying at the end of the month and see how much stuff changes in terms of your priority list. And what I think is really, and that to me is like a little extreme in that, like, if I knew I was dying in a month, I would never do any of the work. I would never check email again. And the truth is that if we know or we hope that we're going to continue to live, we want to have that balance of both. And so the question is, what would your day look like? What would you fill it with if you did know that, this was the end for you?
Yes.
Then what does your day look like now? And weave the two together. Because it's all about, and it's the same thing with food. Like, I'm like, okay, there's days where you're going to eat something because in the moment you're like, if I die tomorrow, I'm so happy I ate that tiramisu. And then, and then there's days where you're sort of putting money into your health bank account, and it's like a future investment by eating the salad, by drinking the green juice. And so I think it's always about like having that vision where you can see into the future, but also be very present in the moment. And so like with all the focus on productivity and capitalism and generating and creating and producing and like all of that over, I'd say, the last 100 years or so, it's just gotten us to this place where all we see is the future. Like, oh, when I retire, I'll have this extra money because I worked after hours, when I And I think what's happening that's interesting is maybe also as there's been an increase unfortunately, in a lot of unhealthy trends and diseases that are coming up, it could be, this is just something that actually is coming to me right now, like it could be that it's a natural way of the world balancing us out to be like, stop thinking about the future because there's just as much good stuff right here.
Yeah, life is happening right now, I think I remember someone that I was talking to saying that they, missed their grandmother's funeral because they were too busy. And it's like something that she regrets to this day, like, I can't believe I didn't do that because work was, so important to me at that time that, I had to miss that. And, I know that we're all at different places on our journey, and if you would have talked to me 2 years ago or 3 years ago or 4 years ago, this conversation might be totally different, but I think that you're right about that. Life is happening all around us, so we can either wait until the future, to make ourselves happy, or we can start living in a way that brings us, pleasure and happiness right now.
Yeah, love it. Okay, I want to sort of deviate a little bit, although not too much, there's this quote that you have on your site that I love so much, and it's, I believe that when a woman loves the body she calls home, she embraces her power to create the life she was born to live. And so this struck me because it's so awesome. And I'm wondering, when you started to we heard your story and got a sense of, okay, how slowly there was like a constant, like your body's like, no, actually, this really is the better way to do it. And you're like, no, I'm going to go do this again. And actually, all right, honey, but this is really the better way to do it. And so that went on. And I'm wondering, once you finally made that shift, how did you go about it in terms of like the really practical logistical side of things? Meaning, if you were saying you were eating cucumber slices for lunch, how were you able to slowly nudge your body back into a place where she was like, actually, I'm now craving rice, or I would like to eat some coconut oil, please.
That's a really good question. I think, the big thing for me comes down a lot to mindset, which is sometimes that's something that's sometimes harder to teach and harder to shift. But for me, I'm recognizing, obviously there are practical things to put into place, and we can talk about those too. But, my big belief is that, what are all these practical things? What do they matter if you're still talking to yourself like shit? Like if you're still calling yourself fat when you look in the mirror and squeezing, your tummy and like, your stomach and saying like, look at all this fat, or look at my cottage cheese, or God, my butt's so big, like if you're drinking like green smoothies and you're eating salads, but you're still talking to yourself like absolute garbage, like what does any of it matter, right? And so for me, I really realized, like, I was viewing my body as the enemy all of this time, and I was viewing my body as, you know, something that was betraying me, right? Something that was that my body didn't have my back. You know, like I would refer to my body as it. It is failing me. My body is, you know, it is breaking down. You know, so a big thing was sort of realizing that, you know, my body is here to support me. My body adapts to everything I throw her way, whether it's eating cucumber slices. Like, she may feel really fatigued and she may feel like shit, but she's still, you know, trying to adapt to that and trying to, like, give me the greatest sense of, you know, physicality and aliveness no matter what I throw her way. Even if I'm, you know, eating foods that make me feel poorly, or not eating enough, or pushing myself past the point of no return, you know, my body is still trying to support me. So I think, and I don't really exactly remember how I got to this place, but, you know, really recognizing, like, this is what is running the show, and this is what is making up stories and telling me lies, or essentially, like, you know, berating my body. So something in my brain has got to shift. So it doesn't really matter if I'm eating cucumber slices or starving myself, or even, like, eating a perfectly balanced diet with X number of calories, and, you know, I mean, none of that really matters unless I actually believe that, you know, my body is my best friend, and I am in that place right now where, like, you know, ultimately my body is my home in this lifetime. You know, this is where I live. The body is the vessel for our spirits, right? You know, and so to be able to leverage our bodies for the utmost life experience, you know, the greatest experience that we can have. I mean, that's sort of how I view things. You know, it's take care of your body, treat your body kindly, talk to your body nicely, feed your body nourishing foods, rest when you need to rest, so that you can actually show up fully in your life, you know, so that you can actually show up to live the life that you were, you know, born to live. You know, and so ultimately, like, mindset is a big thing, you know, and also learning the things that, you know, as health coaches, we talk a lot about bioindividuality, which is essentially this concept that, you know, what works for one person doesn't always work for someone else. And I think the food and diet industry would like us to believe that everyone needs to do the South Beach diet, or everyone needs to do paleo, or everyone needs to do this, and that's the next best thing that's going to give you this body and life of your dreams. But, you know, really it's uncovering for you as an individual what truly works for you. And that's sort of what we do, you know, as coaches. We help people uncover what that is for them, you know, like what those specific foods are, practices, like how many hours of sleep do you need every night to feel really good. You know, and I think as women, we're not always given those tools, because I think our mom's generation didn't really have them, you know, and the generation before that, like, we're sort of taught to, you know, think our periods are gross, and, you know, not really talk about the things that are going on with us, or viewing, like, our body as separate in a negative way. You know, I had another client who referred to her body as an alien. She's like, I don't even know what's going on in here. It's like an alien. I don't know what's going on here. You know, and it's like, oh, that's part of you. You know, we don't you know, teach our little girls about, like, here are your organs, and this is what's inside of you. It's like, you know, you start to bleed, you have your period, and you block it away. You don't talk about it, or it's gross and it's dirty, and, you know, I mean, you think about the negative aspects that are sort of put on our bodies. So, you know, our bodies are really great tools to let us know, you know, emotionally, like, our feelings, how we feel day to day, like what's adding up, and also, you know, just physically, like how we feel, what manifests in terms of symptoms. Like, our bodies are always communicating with us. It's like, are you actually listening? So that's sort of a off into, you know, I went on a tangent there, but
no,
yeah.
It's so good. I love this stuff. I talk about it all the time, so I'm so excited. I think that, you know, the other thing to add on to what you were talking about is that, you know, we only see the outside. So there's so much judgment of like, oh, my thigh here, and the, you know, muffin top here, and jiggly arms here. And no one's ever walking around going like, I have the best liver ever. Like it's not something that happens because we can't see it and we don't necessarily know. I mean, the tests can tell us a little bit, but that's as far as it goes. So what I found was very, very useful too, is to constantly envision, even just for a second, like when I'm feeling sort of shitty or not great about myself, I just remember like, oh, like my lungs doing all this work, my heart pumping the blood through my, like all freaking night long, even when I'm sleeping, like all the gajillion and one things that we don't even know about that's happening in the same millisecond in our body is just so miraculous that you can't not see it as a gift. Like it's like you're like, oh my God, this is like the most ridiculously awesome machine ever.
Yeah.
And she's working for me so that I can get up and do whatever I'm doing. So do I want to sit here and complain about it, or do I want to get on with it and do something?
Yeah, ultimately, you know, the big thing is like our bodies, and this isn't to be judgmental or shaming or anything like that, but you know, our bodies are, it's sort of like what we put in is what we get out, you know, so that means food, that means like words, that means, you know, how well we're, you know, taking care of ourselves, you know, so it's a lot of times we, you know, and I was like this in the past, like I would get upset with my body for, you know, feeling tired or being fat in my mind, you know, and it's like, well, how are you taking care of yourself? You know, it's like, that's sort of what it boils down to, you know, in my mind. It's like, how are you actually caring for yourself? And if you are, you know, taking the most exquisite care of yourself, the absolute best care of yourself that you possibly can, and you're still overweight or you're still feeling not satisfied, then maybe there's another conversation to be had about, you know, around really like what is you know, what does this mean? Maybe this is where your body needs to be at this point in time, and why is that? But generally, I find it's, you know, when we feel really negatively about our bodies, chances are we're not really taking the best care of ourselves that we possibly can.
Yeah. And even sometimes when we are in a position where we think we're doing everything, it can be frustrating sometimes to get still like a sign from your body being like, no, even though you're doing all this stuff that is right on paper, like I still have this issue that's not going away, and so I'm going to keep nagging you about it. I see it as a gift, even though it can be frustrating in the moment, because it's still like a mechanism in which to be informed that, hey, by the way, there's an imbalance internally that you might not be able to see, but it's happening, and something more exploration needs to happen, more detective work needs to happen, whatever that means, whether it means getting the help of other healers or doctors or working on your own stuff. But there's something that still needs to be addressed. And so
yeah, totally. You know, and such a great example of that is skin, you know. I have a lot of food allergies, and that's something that took a long time for me to kind of uncover. But, you know, I had this horrible adult acne for a while, you know, and I just didn't understand the connection. I was like, why am I dealing with this? I feel like I'm doing everything right. But, you know, come to find out, I had these food allergies, and I had, you know, some other, like a gut infection. I had a lot of other things going on, you know, and my body is like, literally, I would be frustrated, like, oh God, I'm so gross, and my face looks so bad. But ultimately, it was like my body's really trying to say, like, yo, something's going on here. Like, we need a little help in here, you know, which I didn't understand at that time, but now, you know, having that experience, it's like I always know that it's such a gift. We have like such a direct like line of communication.
Yeah. We do, if we want to listen.
Yes, if we want to listen.
Yeah. Which is when you go to Stephanie. She will teach you how to listen. Awesome. So this is all such good, juicy stuff. And I wanted to ask you one last question in the wrap up. And this is more sort of like rapid fire stream of consciousness answers. But I'm sort of wondering, what are the top 3 things that give you pleasure in your life?
Oh. Well, I would say, the first thing that comes to mind for me is beauty. So like really cultivating experiences of beauty, whether that is like being in nature, or I love flowers. I keep mentioning flowers. Just making sure, yeah, making sure that that I look for beauty, which is a little bit intangible, but in terms of tangible things, I love traveling. Traveling brings me so much joy. It's like my one, big, life's dream. I feel like is to constantly just make sure that I bring more of those experiences traveling, and my husband is really wonderful. My marriage is something that really brings me a lot of joy and pleasure. Just the connection that we share and that we constantly are deepening into is really wonderful. My sisters, in terms of my biological sisters and my soul sisters, those are four things. But I would say relationships, travel, and beauty. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Stephanie. I want the ladies to know where they can find you. So tell us a little bit about what's the best place that they can get more info, read more about what you're about, and all your musings and stuff.
Sure. You can go to my website, which is Stephanie, Stephanie, Burg, BURG, coaching.com. And you can read my blog there, or I'm also on Instagram and Facebook too. Instagram, I'm Stephanie M. Burg, and Facebook, just search me. But those are ways that you can find me. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and those will also be below in the little paragraph description, so that you guys can just click on it straight away. It'll be a lot easier. I think that you've got also this really great little free 7-day course that you're offering right now. Can you tell us a little bit about that, in case the girls want to jump in on that?
Yeah. So that is 7 days to love the body you call home, and it is a week-long course. That's really designed to give you some simple practices to put into place to kind of bring more of that body love and awareness into your day. So they're very simple, very easy, like quick tasks to kind of to pull into your day, but added up over the week, they make for a powerful shift towards the end. So check that out, and you can get that on my website too.
Awesome. Great. Okay. Well, sending you so much love. Thank you again.
Thank you. So good to see you.
Thank you Oh, yes, thank you. All right, ladies. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was as valuable to you as it was to me. And I will see you next time with the next badass chick. All right. Take care. Bye.